This week on Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts, target date funds. Is it a good idea or just the lazy way to do things? Let's break it down. Welcome into Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist, Phil Putney. Now let's get rolling with today's show. Hey everybody, welcome into the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with Phil and I as we talk investing, finance, retirement, and Phil, let's talk target date funds, the low-hanging fruit, easy option that's out there for many people. Cool option. I mean, if you're going to do nothing else, I think it's a good idea, but there's also some other things to think about, yeah?
Absolutely. I mean, I think they have their place. They're kind of the default option anymore in most 401k plans. I mean, based on your date of birth, they'll put you in a certain target date fund, which
like automatically, like you're not even selecting anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't select, that's where you're going, so that's not a bad thing. I agree with that because unfortunately, most people going into 401ks without something like that have the analysis of paralysis, right? Or paralysis of analysis, I should say.
Yeah. You can't make a decision. You're stuck.
The 15, 20 options you have, and it's like, which one? And you're looking at history and, oh yeah, I'll pick this one. I like, that's had a great return. And then you get in it and realize that, that's the micro cap strategy that has a, 80% drawdown or something. I mean, these crazy things, so you get yourself set up for the wrong type of strategy, or you go way too conservative. So
true. Well, check this out. So according to Morningstar, $4 trillion in assets now in target date funds, which is big money.
Yes.
8 out of 10 Vanguard 401k investors hold one. And again, so I don't want to totally just bag on them, but they are a very easy option. And like you said, they're automatically put in. But are they the best option? I mean, maybe earlier in life, if you don't understand what you're getting into, you're not really sure about investing, you just want to make sure you're contributing for retirement, probably a cool way to go. And that's probably why they were invented, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's, how active or passive do you want to be in your investment planning? Are you working with an advisor? If you've got an advisor, probably not the way to go. Right. Yeah. I mean, talk to your advisor. I mean, technically, as an advisor, I can't give advice on the 401k because 401ks are kind of a goofy animal in that even though my client would have money in a 401k, the 401k from an advisor standpoint is the client. So we've just got to be careful of, as an advisor, giving you direct advice on, well, here's, what to pick.
Right.
That being said, I mean, it definitely can give some direction versus just picking the standard target date fund. So if you're not working with an advisor, you're not comfortable, looking at the different investment options and picking something, it's not a bad thing. To me, it's like the Swiss Army knife, right? Does it do several things? And it does okay. It'll cut something. You can drive put a screw in, but
it's not going to cut something as effectively as
Yeah, it's not going to do any of them really well. Same thing with a target date.
Well, so let's point out a couple of things. We'll point out a couple positives, and we'll point out a couple negatives, and that way we just kind of share a little bit. So they're automatic, right? They auto rebalance, which can be a good thing. You don't have to kind of no fuss, no muss, set it and forget it. That also gives it its own negative as well, but it's got that as the positive.
Right.
And I think that's for a lot of folks, that's the simple thing, because you figure, okay, I got $1 million in this account, and it's growing nicely or whatever. And as it gets closer to retirement, it's going to start to pare down the risk. That's also true, but also a misnomer, right? Because I think some people think that it takes them down to no risk, and it does not do that.
Absolutely. Yes, I mean the target date fund is on a glide scale between stocks and bonds, right? So it's going to be the further out the target date, the more heavily weighted towards equity or stock that target date fund is. But to your point, somebody that has got a 2025 target date fund, meaning that's your target date, your retirement date. Yeah. Most people think, well, it's got me in a very conservative portfolio, and that's not the case.
I've even heard people think it takes them down to like zero, and it's like, no, it doesn't do that. Most of the time, 50-50 is about as low as they'll go, right?
Absolutely. So you look, and they'll go lower as you get beyond that target date because they continue to move. Okay. But I mean, the reality is that, I mean, if you look at I'm looking at a Vanguard 2025 target date fund today, 50-50, right? So you're half in stock, half in bonds. So it's not as conservative as most people think once you get to that point. Now, is that good or bad? It really comes down to your scenario.
Yeah.
But it really is the perception, right? Most people are thinking, to your point, that, oh, it's got to have me in a pretty conservative portfolio by the
time I get there. Mm-hmm.
Retirement, thinking maybe even like a 40-60 or 20-80 or something like that. Where
right.
Heavily weighted towards bonds.
The Tax Smart Retiree is your comprehensive guide to mastering tax efficiency for a flourishing retirement. You will find indispensable advice and actionable strategies designed to enhance tax savings, maximize Social Security benefits, protect against market volatility, and develop a customized retirement plan. To get your free ebook, click the link in the show notes of today's episode and download your copy of the Tax Smart Retiree right now.
And I just saw, Phil, that I don't remember, maybe a week or two ago, that most target date funds are actually starting way more aggressive now. Over the last 5 years, they're opening more aggressive than they were just 10 years ago.
Yes. I mean, they're in the world of investing relatively new, so I think the companies are kind of working with the data and revamping how target date funds work. But yeah, I mean, they do end up more aggressive than most people think. And so the other point with being aggressive is that bond component of the target date fund, which is always thought of as, well, that's the safe side of the portfolio, so to speak.
Right.
I mean, we've all come to realize coming through 2022 with the rising interest rates that is not necessarily the case.
Yeah, and we're going to actually talk more about that on next week's episode as well, when we talk about the 4% rule and how it's getting a makeover from the guy who invented it, actually, or created it. So we're going to talk about that next week. So check that out. Subscribe to us if you haven't. But for the target date fund, so again, the idea, I think if you're younger, I mean, if you're 30 and you just got you just changed a job, and of course, more people change jobs now than they used to, but you're in a place or whatever, and you're looking at a long way out, probably cool, right? Because it's aggressive. You're not worried about it. You're just kind of going with it. But I think as you get to a certain age, you and I were just joking at the time we're taping this, we're not very far removed from Memorial Day, and it was unseasonably cool around a lot of the country for that. But people mostly tend to think of Memorial Day is the unofficial kickoff to summer, even though it didn't feel like it this year at all. But I think when you get when you get to 50 plus, you start to think about that as the unofficial kickoff to retirement, because you're getting closer. And so maybe a target date fund isn't the best option, and working with an advisor is going to give you a bigger smorgasbord of kind of things you could maybe get into. What's your thoughts there? And also because of the fees too. I think that's the other thing, right? Fees are typically high in these.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be just a straight index fund because there is actual management taking place. So they do have higher fees than just a straight index fund.
Okay.
To me, I mean, target date funds are, again, a good option for somebody that, maybe doesn't have enough to work with an advisor, or they don't have an advisor. It's a great option rather than just, pulling out the list and throwing a dart at it and picking
right or doing nothing.
Or looking at the 1, 3, 5, 10-year returns and say, oh, that's a good one. I want to use that fund, right?
Stable fund, like a stable fund.
Well, or even, it's the high growth fund. You're looking back at the last 10 years when it's been relatively stable and high growth and thinking, oh, I'm going to pick that one. And then you get into some volatility. So unless you know or have a good idea or are comfortable with picking underlying investments, then a target date fund can be a great option.
Okay.
Once you get to the point of working with an advisor, especially as you get near retirement, they become less of an option to be used, because now you have to start looking more specifically at your scenario, your overall investments, and start positioning them according to when are you going to start taking money? How much are you going to need? What's the tax ramifications? There's all these other components. Because the challenge with a target date fund is it's just that fund. So it's just your 401k, let's say. Well, it doesn't know anything about all the other investments you have. So maybe you've got a brokerage account, and how is that invested? When do you plan on spending that? So there's all these other factors that have to come into play to look at your picture more holistically, the whole picture. So
that's a good point.
The pro and the con to it, right? It's simple. It's very easy.
Yeah.
Set it, forget it, so to speak. But usually a set it and forget it type of retirement plan doesn't always work out the way you anticipate.
Well, it definitely falls more into the one size fits all strategy that so many other firms the bigger box firms out there like to employ, right? I mean, it's just everybody fits into the same category kind of thing. And so I guess it's worth asking the question, are you planning for retirement or are you just coasting towards it, right?
Right, and that's really kind of the target date fund is that coast.
So. Yeah, it's coast, yeah. So if you really want to get more specific and more intentional, I think maybe that's the better word. Again, could it be a good savings tool? Like the 401k in general. Is it a good savings tool if you're doing nothing else? Yeah. Absolutely, yes. Especially to get the free money. But are there other things out there that you might want to be more intentional about building your retirement wealth? Well, then that's also true. So if you got some questions, need some help, we'll keep it short this week on target date funds. Definitely talk with your advisor. Make sure you're talking with a qualified professional. Get some help about, is it the right fit for me, or is there better options? And what are those options? And how do I go about employing those? All that kind of stuff. You can reach out to Phil, of course. As always, we got the links in the show descriptions for you to get in contact with him. You can also just call him the numbers on the screen as well as in the show description. So if you need some help, reach out to Phil or reach out to a qualified pro. And don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and that way you catch future episodes. And next week, we're going to talk about the 4% rule, and target date funds kind of fit into that conversation as well. So we'll get back into
set it and forget it.
Set it and forget it. We'll get into it next week here on Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts. Thank you, my friend. We'll catch you next time.
Phil? Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.